Hey everybody, what's up? Tubalcade here. Quick history type lesson thing involved with this whole flat earth gig. At least the way I look at it. If you go back, I got a couple lists here. I'm not going to read them, but just, again, as Mark Sargent says, do your own research. I'm just going to throw some tidbits out that I have researched. So I'm saying you guys do it. But I got a few lists here. One is supposedly the history of civilizations. You know, claiming, ancient Mesopotamia, then ancient Egypt, then ancient India, then ancient China, ancient Israel, Rome, Greeks, into Japanese, Imperial China, Mayan civilizations, etc. So it's supposedly a map of the world's civilizations that apparently is agreed upon as fact, kind of like the theoretical science. So take a look at the history of civilizations first and get an understanding of that. And when you take a look at that, I said I got a few pages right here, what's considered the history of tax. It's chronology. So Egypt had taxes during their days. Cooking oil taxes. All right? Greece had taxes. The Roman Empire had taxes. Britain, to colonial America, post-revolution America. So take a look at the history of supposed recorded civilization, that history. Then overlay on top of that history, the supposed recorded history of taxation on us, the common man. Okay? Overlay the two, they almost start at the same time and continue forward. Alright? So, minimum, taxes had been in existence for potentially 1,500 years prior to Rome. Okay? So, leading up to the days of Rome, taxes had been instituted on the common man for at least 1,500 years. That was 2,000 years ago. So, we're talking potentially 3,500 years worth of taxation and recorded, controlled civilization that hasn't changed the way it operates. The type of religion and the name of the leaders and the elite, kings, queens, pontiffs, priests, whatever you want to call them, from all over this globe, have ruled through fear, might, and as we see, taxation. And as we lead up to, let's just say, America, we're supposed to be free and fought wars about taxation. Look into the Whiskey Rebellion that took place here in America. In 1791, the Whiskey Rebellion took place in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And what it was George Washington and the Congress and the, as it says, a tax protest in the United States beginning in 1791 during the presidency of George Washington. The so-called whiskey tax was the first tax imposed on a domestic product by the newly formed federal government. It became law in 1791. So in 1791, our elected officials imposed a tax on the people for production. And it's a coincidence it's in tax, or in whiskey, and if I'm correct, George Washington was a distiller. So I don't think he wanted competition. He actually sent the military on its own citizens in 1791. So did anything change after 1776? In 1791, our own government was sending its military against its own people to enforce tax. Alright, so that's 230 years ago, 220 years ago. 220 years ago, America was already using the military government to enforce tax. I'm not making that up. You do the research. Then, here's a couple lists of events that took place. I'm just going to take some random time periods between 1300 and 1400, then 1400 and 1700s. Certain events that took place. If you notice from the beginning of the 1300s to the end of the 1300s, you'll see a lot of war. Scotland in 1314, the Robert de Bruce battle. France and England were just fighting. Swiss victory in 1315. Gained victory over the Duke of Austria, so Swiss and Austria were fighting. The Ottoman Empire was founded in 1326. Isabel Despose's husband, England, was invaded by the French, wife of King Edward. Isabel, supported by France. So you have the French, the Spanish, English, Austrians, Swiss, Germans, Scottish, Irish, all battling. Chinese, Buddhist monks found Ming Dynasty in 1368. 1372, revival of 100-Year War, okay, between French and British. Venetians and Genoans fought a war. The Peasant Revolt in 1381. Portugal free from Spain in 13... So the 1300s was falling apart for the elite. The peasants were understanding that they were full of shit. The elite were battling using the peasants as fodder, and the peasants were getting tired of it. It wasn't about religion anymore. It was about just elites fighting over people, lands, and properties, and titles, and who has the right to govern, and where did this come from, this right to govern. So the 1300s was strife with the old world elite European monarchies starting to fall apart. The veil was starting to be lifted. Then when we come into the 1400s, supposedly that's when the Renaissance begins in Italy. The interest in the classics. China grows. But one of the most important things that happens in the 1400s and 1450 is the printing press is developed. So now not only was the information that the elite wanted to put in your hands going to be available, but also material by the non-elites trying to expose their scam. So the printing press was the game changer in 1450. And then if you start to see what transpired after 1450, Leonardo da Vinci starts in the 1500s. Portugal and Spain fighting again. Portugal is in Brazil, Spanish conquistadors. So they're spreading across the water, conquering more lands now after Columbus. So we went from the 1400s, mid-1400s printing press. At the end of the 1400s, more land was discovered. And with the discovery of that more land, it let the peasants have an idea that we could get away, maybe, from this elite and religious tyranny that has terrorized every human being that existed since its inception. This idea of taxation and a controlled civilization by elites have been going on since Mesopotamia. So you overlay civilization history map timeline and history of taxation, civilizations being ruled by the priestcrafts, religion, and then the statecrafts and them working together, meaning the crowns, the elite, saying they are elite because the religious people who were tight with God said, yes, their blood is special to rule over you. That started to fall apart in the 1300s. Then the 1400s came, the printing press. And then with Martin Luther translating the Bible for the first time into English, or, the given tongue, German, to give to the common people so they could actually read it instead of being told it, which was the Vatican. And then you get the Jesuits who were formed. Then Copernicus, heliocentricity. So the whole explosion of all the so-called math and scientists that we herald today that supposedly designed and defined our reality came out of the 1500s, post finding more land, which would allow us peasants to get out from their rule. So they had to create this paradigm that we peasants and the elite, the explorers, have found all the land now. There's nowhere you can go. You are on a spinning ball and you cannot outrun us ever. Yeah, Americans, you can call yourselves the United States and say you're free from us, the old world elite. But we view you as a new market for us to rape, pillage, and plunder like we have done everywhere else on this so-called plain planet. So in over 3,500 years, potentially, nothing has changed. That's proof there is no evolution, just to start with right there. In over 3,500 years, just because our lives have gotten easier with technology, that does not mean we have evolved. Socially, we are still being taxed to death. And you will be punished severely in America, the freest country in the world, if you do not pay your taxes. And there's an example, factually, from 1791. How George Washington, who was part of the elite of America, sent the army against its own people to guarantee it would collect taxes and to set the precedence that if you want to exist here in America, property, product, we're going to tax the hell out of you, and if you don't pay your taxes, we'll come and get you. That's what the European way was. That's what the Middle Eastern way was. That's what the Northern African way was going back 3,500 years. So society and man and the way that they are controlled and ruled has not changed in 3,500 years. How much time do you need to evolve, people? If there is such a thing as evolution. We have not changed in over 3,500 years the way we rule and interact with each other. So, you do a little fact checking on civilizations recorded, tax history recorded, 1300s, 1400s, 1500s, what transpired. That the veil of the rule of the church and crown was starting to crumble. And the name Freemasonry didn't come around until later. There were the Rosicrucians. There's Alhambras. There was a lot of organizations that were fighting this tyrannical system since its inception. Who started it? Who knows? Doesn't matter. Hermes, Pythagoras, Enki, who knows? But if you look at history, you will see a pattern of the controlling faction from empire to empire, organized and acting in the same manner. From Mesopotamia to Egypt to so-called Israel, Persia, to Rome, Greeks, right into Europe. And they always, again, in the 1500s, they were still killing each other over religion, over land, over rights. Nothing has changed. So that's proof there is no evolution, because nothing's changed in over 3,500 years. The people still accept the shit shoved down their throats from the elite ruling class. It has not changed. America didn't change a thing. Again, we may think we're free here to do what we want, which is somewhat affordable, but ultimately the ruling European elite that hasn't changed the way they do business only looked at us as a new market to rape and pillage and to do business deals with our leaders, make agreements with our leaders. Again, the War of 1812, the bank charters were up in 1811, which were 80% backed by European elite. 1813, England takes over all of American Freemasonry and Grand Lodge Freemasonry, not Orient Freemasonry, but Grand Lodge Freemasonry was taken over by England in 1813 and put rules and regulations in place, no politics or religion being discussed in your lodges. So, you look, you lay it down. And that's where we are today with our science, our education, our paradigm. They have been able to create zealots for religion, from religion, over to science. If you've ever engaged in conversation with someone who believes in the ball, believes that water sticks to the bottom of a spinning ball that's tilted and wobbling, being hurled through space at a chaotic rate, and when you talk to someone who believes that for me even to be talking to you, or anyone to be discussing anything here on this spinning ball, the amount of coincidences and constants that have to be laid down on their paradigm, explanation of where we come from and why we're here. The amount of coincidences and constants is ludicrous. There's less of those to explain the Bible, let's say. So for us to be here, it's not explained through real science, it's explained through theoretical, with a lot of ifs and a lot of symbols and a lot of integers and things all melded together. Well, when you take history and meld certain different histories and overlay them, civilization, taxation, printing press, suppression of truthers, people being burned at the stake, inquisitions, into the science explosion, which was control and was all really theoretical because none of it could have been proved in those days. Repeated and duplicated from seeing things move above them and trying to use the psychological shell game to say, no, you're moving, they're moving too, we're all moving at rates really we can't even see or comprehend. The speed of sound is 700 miles an hour, and we're moving faster than that, so we can't really comprehend the speeds that we're all moving at, but sense none of it because of the coincidences and constants that have to be in place. So there's Tubal King, to me, giving you a little overlay of where the flat Earth movement came from, was the reissuing of old known stuff that had been suppressed, coming back up, percolating like in a coffee pot. So who is behind this perpetration of this? As I said, it's been a movement that's been around for over 3,500 years. Whoever is in charge of taxation, religion, and your property, and who wants to be in control of your speech, that's who's been behind it. They've been here ever since, and they just move from civilization to civilization, changing names, intermarrying, changing allegiances, religions. It doesn't matter to them because it's all about control. And who started NASA? The Nazis. Who started the Nazis? Jesuits. Where'd the playbook come from? Where did the Jesuits come from? The Vatican. Where did the Vatican come from? Rome. Where'd Rome come from? Etc. Down the line. All right, peeps. Flat lines matter. Do your research. Look at your history and see when things started to go down. Peace out.